today, so we're still looking at solving by factoring. We just have a lot more steps to it today. So that teeny tiny baby step we took yesterday where I sort of just showed you the concept, today we're full on jumping in. Okay, so to solve by factoring, our first rule, okay, means that it has to meet the requirement that we said yesterday, which means it has to equal 0. If it doesn't equal 0, either A, we can't solve it by factoring, or B, we need to move things around so that we can solve it by factoring. You cannot make something up to try and make solving by factoring work if it does not equal 0. Okay. So let's say we have x squared minus 9x plus 20 equals 0. Okay, so step 1, does this equal 0?
Yes.
Yes, which is what we want it to be. So that's good. Step 2. We are going to factor the polynomial. So we're going to ignore the entire equation, and we are going to focus on the polynomial portion that's on the other side of the equal sign, right? So ignore the part that equals 0, and we're going to focus on the polynomial. We will then have to use our factoring rules. Okay, so then that goes back to our last unit, right? Is there a GCF? Count how many terms it is. Here is the good news. You don't actually have to factor completely. Now, it would be good if there's a GCF to factor it out because your numbers will be smaller. Okay, but you don't have to factor completely. You have to make it so there are things being multiplied together where we're getting rid of this x squared because the x squared is the dilemma. So you do have a little bit of wiggle room in your factoring. Okay, so if we look at x squared minus 9x plus 20, is there a GCF in that? No. Nope. How many terms is it?
3.
3. How do we factor 3 terms? Right? A times c is 20. So we want multiples of 20. Then we have to decide our sign. So what's our sign rule here going to be?
Bigger number negative.
Yep, we need them both to be negative. So what set do we want to pick?
4 and 5.
Negative 4 and negative 5. Can we use the shortcut on this one?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so this is going to factor into an x minus 4 and an x minus 5.
Yeah.
Now, what we're really doing, okay, we are really going to substitute. What does the word substitute mean?
Something for something else.
Right? Something for something else. Something goes in, something comes out. So we're going to substitute the factors into the equation. Now, I do not think you need to write an entire new step showing that you are substituting the factors into the equation. But what I do want you to understand that you're doing is you're taking this trinomial out and putting those factors in. We can do that because these are equivalent. They're the same thing. It'd be like swapping 10 for 2 times 5. Okay, but all I would do is just, once I get it factored, put them equal 0 on the end of the factors. Okay, and then once we do that, now it looks exactly like what we were looking at yesterday. So now we can solve each factor by setting it equal to 0. Okay, so I can take x minus 4 and set that equal to 0, just like we were doing. And take x minus 5 and set that equal to 0. So we get answers of x equals 4 and x equals 5. How could we check and see if our answers are correct? Yusef?
Plug them in.
Plug them back in. So if we go back to our original problem.
Can you do that to the x? Yeah.
You could as long as you factored correctly. If you made a mistake factoring, then it might not work there, you know what I'm saying? So you could go back to this original problem and say, okay, 4 squared minus 9 times 4 plus 20 equals, plug that into your calculator, and it should say 0. If it doesn't say 0, then you did something wrong. Now, is that all you would need to do? No, what else would you need to plug in?
The 5.
The 5, right? Then you'd have to plug the 5 in and say, okay, 5 squared minus 9 times 5 plus 20 equals, and that better give you a 0 as well?
Yep.
Those of us who are putting it in our calculators, are we getting out zeros? Yep. Okay, so there's a way you can at least check and make sure that you're correct. Now, it won't tell you what the right answer is, but it will tell you if you made a mistake. So you can at least go back and say, oop, that didn't work. I better see if I made an error with a sign. Or did I factor incorrectly or something like that. Okay? Questions on that example? Obviously, the key to this working is that we can still factor. Right, so let's make sure. So let's say we have something like 3x squared plus 6x equals 0. Okay, so the first step says, does this equal 0?
Yes.
Yes, so we're good there. Step 2 says to look at the polynomial and to factor it. So we are going to look at the 3x squared plus 6x. Does it have a GCF?
Yes.
Yes, so what is our GCF?
3x.
3x. Now, this is one of the situations, like I said, where if you miss the GCF as being 3x, as long as you got the x out, you'd be fine, because you'd get rid of the x squared. Ideally, hopefully, we would all catch the GCF, but. Okay, so we substituted that back in, because now I'm just rewriting the equation with that new stuff in there. And now I can take each of those factors and set them both equal to 0. So what's my first factor? 3x equals 0. And what's my second factor?
X plus 2.
X plus 2 equals 0. And then we're just solving our basic 1 and 2 step equations. Again, like I said yesterday, if you were like, oh man, I really forgot how to do those, go back and watch one of the videos on my YouTube channel. There's 1 and 2 step equations there. Or come to plus time. I know, me having a YouTube channel is super cool.
Mr. Wrinkle.
Mr. Wrinkle.
The elephant toothpaste wrap.
X equals 0 and x equals negative 2. It's super dorky, I realize, but it's also super helpful if you need info, so I'm just telling you it's there. It's better than trying to Google and find your own video with someone who's using different wording and explanations. There's Dr. Berger, he makes the videos. Have you guys seen those? He does like the Pearson videos from like the textbooks and stuff.
Oh.
It's Dr. Frank Berger is his name.
Number 10. Number 10.
3x squared plus 6 equals 0. Yeah, no, I see that one.
10 where's the factor?
X squared minus 8x plus 20 equals 4.
Doesn't equal 0.
Correct, it does not equal 0, so we aren't meeting that first step.
Oh, you could subtract.
So our options are either to A, decide that we can't solve it by factoring. Unfortunately, that's a problem today because we can't solve this by taking a square root because it has an x to the first power in it. And we can't solve it by graphing because graphing also requires it to equal 0. So we're kind of stumped. We have to make it equal 0. Okay, so how do we move this 4? Subtract 4. Why am I writing this 4 underneath the 20 and not in a different location?
Because it doesn't have a variable.
Right? It does not. It's a like term. We can combine those terms. So this would then become an x squared minus an 8x plus a 16 equals 0. Okay, so now we're going to look at the polynomial. How many terms is it?
3.
3. So how are we going to factor 3 terms? A times C, right? There's no GCF, so A times C. Four and 4. What do we need to do those signs? Negative 4 and negative 4. Can I use the shortcut on this one? Sure can. So this is going to factor into x minus 4 times x minus 4.
Oh, wait, never mind.
Okay, now what do I do?
Bring your x out.
Solve. X minus 4 equals 0.
Set each factor equal to 0.
Yeah. Are we ever gonna get the dog in here?
The go-go
Yeah.
Well, just like 2 minutes ago, or just look at the line.
A little bit of yoga.
Yeah, but then he said dog.
And Midna.
Yeah, are we ever gonna get the dog in here?
Midna's got to be better trained.
Midnight yoga?
Okay, so x equals 4, x equals 4. Ooh, I could go for this idea. Dog yoga, Midna yoga.
Oh, that'd be
I'm
cool.
gonna go with you.
Okay, x equals 4, x equals 4. Do we need both of those answers?
No.
No, why not?
Because
Because they're the same.
So really, all of this over here was a little bit irrelevant because these two things are the same. So if we recognize that, we could have just done it once. So here's the situation where we don't get two answers. It's one answer of x equals 4. If we were to graph this, what would that U-shaped graph look like? What would it be doing?
Increasing.
It's not straight, it's still a U.
Curve.
Where is it gonna touch the x-axis?
Oh, 4.
4.
Both sides.
Nope.
No, because
Just
that's,
on
it's,
one.
that's negative positive.
It's gonna be-
Right? Just on one side. It's just gonna touch it right there. It's not gonna actually cross and go underneath it.
Right.
It's a
Yes.
Would we be wrong if like a problem was this? I was on a test or a quiz and we wrote 2 answers.
If you wrote x equals 4 and x equals 4, I would not take off points.
Maybe.
But if you put 4 and negative 4, that would obviously be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Be okay on that one. One more. And this one's a little bit super not fun, but it's okay. We're still gonna do it.
I bet it's super.
Alright, 7. No, take me out. Take me out. Cause I'm injured.
4x squared
Oh boy.
equals 9x plus 9. Does this equal 0?
No.
No. So we need to make this equal 0. Any thoughts on how we would like to make this equal 0? Kyle?
You put both terms on the other one. Yeah,
Okay, right. So you're kind of doing that, right? We could go either way, sort of.
yeah.
So we have a choice to make. We can either move both of these over here, or this one over here. And then my students are like, oh, but moving 1 is easier than moving 2. However, that then makes our A negative. How do we feel about factoring with a negative A? Ooh, that doesn't sound super fun, right? So let's move 2 the other direction. But guys, don't make your life difficult. They're not like terms, so just move them both at once. How do we move a positive 9x?
Subtract.
We subtract it. How do we move a positive 9?
Subtract.
Subtract it.
But there's nothing on the other side.
Can any of these terms be combined?
No.
No, the key is just to make sure you write it in the correct order so your trinomial factoring makes sense. So make sure it's standard form, highest degree, 4x squared minus 9x minus 9 equals 0. And there's a reason why we are only going to do one of these.
And then plus another.
Was there?
No, does this equal 0?
Oh, yes.
How many terms is it?
It's a trinomial.
It's a trinomial, so A times C is negative 36.
You gotta say it. Minus 3, minus 2.
What signs do we want?
2 negatives on the 30 and 12.
Not 2 negatives.
1 negative.
1 negative. Which one do we want to be negative? The larger one. Can we use the shortcut on this one?
No.
Nope. So what do we have to do?
4x squared plus 30x minus 12x.
Oops, x. We have to rewrite it into 4 terms. Then what?
Split.
Split it in half.
Oh yeah.
We're having fun yet? GCF over here is what?
X.
X.
Oh, what are you?
What's our GCF over here on the right?
Negative.
3. Or, yeah, negative.
Oh my god. You guys have been both sides.
I love doing
That's on there.
Okay, so we got it factored. But now we have to substitute it back into the equation.
79.
So what are we going to do with that?
Set it to the side.
Set them both equal to 0. Well, this is a rather lengthy process, huh?
Very late.
Yep, it sure is. So we get answers of x equals 3 and x equals -3/4.